welcome to the May 17th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can engage in the process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Engagement Director, and today's episode is brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas and Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas. And before we get into it, I want to take a quick moment of personal privilege to congratulate the Sam Houston State University Bearcats on their first football national championship yesterday. Huntsville is certainly celebrating today, and my week started off on the right foot. Let's see how long those good feelings last now that we are 2 weeks away from Sine Die, the final day of the Texas legislature. And friends, the last few weeks of the Texas legislature, things move fast. The last 2 weeks of session, things fly by and things change by the hour. And we're going to do our best to keep you up to date. We'll hit some of the highlights today, give you a recap of what happened last week and what we're watching this week, or at least over the next couple of days. But please make sure that you're following Texas Impact on social media. Make sure you're following our Leg TV page on social media and on YouTube. And make sure that you're following the Texas Impact team to make sure that you're as up to date as possible. Also, I'll go ahead and plug once again that you should be a member of the Rapid Response Team and a legislative engagement group if you want up-to-the-minute updates and to be paired with people in a legislative district, in your legislative district, to do this work with a team. You can find more information or sign up at texasimpact.org in the Action Center. As far as the Weekly Witness schedule goes, this will be with you today, obviously, and then our finally Weekly Witness episode of the legislative session will be next Monday at noon. The final day of the legislative session is Memorial Day, and there won't be a lot that you can impact by that point. So we'll take the day off of recording that day and then start to identify our plans for post-session. I look forward to your feedback on that. But for sure, we plan on doing a 4 or 5 week legislative wrap-up series soon after the legislators go home, so keep an eye out for that. So on to today, Josh will be joining us momentarily for our legislative update and action alert for the week. If you want to go ahead and pull that up, you can go to texasimpact.org in the Action Center, click on the action alert for the beginning part of this week. But before all of that, in one of my favorite segments that we've added specifically for legislative session, I am honored to welcome to the conversation a last-minute substitute for today, Reverend Tiffanie Postell. Now I've got to check and make sure I got your last name right, Tiffanie, because we didn't actually talk about that before we came on. Tiffanie is the senior pastor of Newman United Methodist Church in Alexandria, Louisiana, and co-leader of the Louisiana Anti-Racism Task Force. Tiffanie, thank you so much for filling in last minute, and congratulations on the big week that you're going to be having this week. With that, the floor is now yours for this week's Weekly Word.
Thank you so much. And I do bring you greetings from the Louisiana Annual Conference. We are over here. This is a big week for us. We are over here moving toward annual conference that will be our annual conference that will be Friday and Saturday. I got to be there Thursday, but Friday and Saturday this week. And so it is a busy, busy, busy week. But I am thankful to step in just to give you this these words of encouragement. And my directive was just reminding the listeners why we do justice work, right? And so when I think about justice work, and when I always start off with my own people in my conference, and we're doing the justice work, we come honest, we come open, we come authentic, we come genuine, we come understanding that we don't know it all, we come understanding that we don't know anything, right? And that we're going to mess up, and that we're not going to say something correctly, but we're learning, we're coming open. And so as I thought about this in stepping in last night, that was my theme. The thing that kept coming up is just to remind people that why we do this work is, number one, because we want everyone to feel included. We want everyone to know that they are loved, everyone to know that they have a seat at the table, and that is why we do it. Doing justice work is not easy. It is probably one of the hardest things that you can do, because a lot of times with justice work, what happens is you're led to pick a side, right? There is an issue and you're led to say, this is how I feel about it, this is what my thoughts are, and you're led to that space. But I remind my people that it is not about us picking a side to an issue. It is about us picking God. It is about us picking God and living and doing and moving about in this world in a way where we see God, in a way where we seek God, in a way where we say, you know what, God, let your will be done in this situation. And we ask God to show up. And we ask God to sit with us in the spaces that even we don't know. And the biggest thing about justice work is when you realize that you don't get it right. Don't be afraid of the conversation that has to come. Don't be afraid of the space that you go to that you say, okay, you know what? I messed up. Or I am to the point now where I realize that I need to reconfigure something that I have been thinking, and you do that, and you're not afraid to do it. And if you have to ask for forgiveness, you ask for forgiveness. That's who we are as Christians. That's who we are as God's children. That's who we are. And so I also always bring up the fact that, hey, you know what? Sometimes put yourself in in a space or an issue, or let something that you deal with come up. And then think about how you want somebody else to treat you while you are processing and learning and understanding, number one, why I feel that way. Number two, how did I get to that understanding of, or get to that space? Is that something I really believe, or is that something that has been passed on to me by my family, by a friend group that I've been a part of? Is that something? And so it's hard to go against something that we've learned, something that's embedded, something that we've carried our entire lives. It's hard for us to do. But I'm reminded over and over again that when we go and have communion, one of the things that we say is, we say, merciful God, we confess that we have not loved you with our whole heart. We have failed to be an obedient church. We have not done your will. We have broken your law. We have rebelled against your love. We have not loved our neighbors, and we have not heard the cry of the needy. Forgive us, we pray. Every time we say those words, we're talking and putting in every situation that we could ever find ourselves in. We're putting in that we have not done it, but our goal is to every day wake up to move closer and further into doing it. And so as you do your work, as you sit and you come genuinely and authentically to this place of justice work, this place that you're going to be met with people who do not look like you, who do not think like you, who are not going to agree with you. It is your responsibility to say, I'm going to be open to learning them more, to learning the story by which they come and how they even came to learn that. I'm going to be open to even just asking myself or asking them the whys, and not judging them by what comes to the forefront. So that is what I have. I'm going to pray for us. I have a prayer here, and I'm not going to read all of it, but there's this book that I have come to really, really love, and it is a collection of meditations for renewal, right? And it's a rhythm of prayer, and it is edited by Sarah Bessey, and it's featuring a whole bunch of different writers. But there is a prayer, a benediction prayer that she has here, and I'm not going to read the entire thing, but there is a part that picks up, and I use it a lot because I love the wording, and so hear these words in the form of a prayer, but I'm going to read them. It says, may we be peacemakers, joy bringers, truth tellers, status quo disruptors, wanderers, and misfits to our time because of resolute contentment. Who never settle for the sit down and shut up life, but the raise up in your she who the sun sets free is free indeed, birthright of freedom. May we be the ones who come close to you because of our vulnerability and not because of our false certainties. Teach us to lay down our mask and our pretenses. You tore down the veil between us and the Holy of Holies. Keep your hands from rehanging that curtain. Give us the opportunity to practice mercy, and courage. This may backfire, but we're feeling bold now. Help us to stay in that boldness. Call us to humility, confession, and repentance, even when pride feels more comfortable and superior. Teach us how to rest, how to abide, and how to light candles and be satisfied. Don't let us get away with divorcing our prayers from our politics and policies, politics and policies and practices. May we love our neighbor. May we learn to sit with you in silence and know it is enough to know you and be known by you and know ourselves. Teach us to pray, God, as you have always welcomed us to pray, fully human, fully yours, fully held, and fully loved. We will tell you the truth of our lives and of this world, and we will listen to the truth you speak back to us. The truth of our belovedness, of your justice, of your faithfulness, of love, and say, let it be so. Let it be in me. Amen.
Amen. Pastor, thank you so much for getting us started on a right foot this morning. And we pray that you have a successful annual conference this week. And thank you for your ministry and congratulations. We look forward to hearing amazing things moving forward.
Thank you so much. And I am, Scott, going to jump off so I can get ready for my next. But thank you so much.
We'll talk soon. Thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Next up, we welcome to the conversation Josh Houston. Josh, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it is definitely your show today with 2 weeks left in the legislative session. Your days are long, our days are long, and trying to do our best to keep our members up to date on what's happening is a full-time job in and of itself. So let's jump right in. You feeling all right?
Yeah, I got a different location behind me, don't I?
Yeah, I assume you're practically living up at the Capitol these days. Actually, I'm not assuming. We talk about that. So anyway, let's jump in. We do have 2 weeks left in the legislative session, and last week was the first really significant deadline of the legislative session. Thursday was the deadline for the House of Representatives to pass House bills. So help us remember or catch us up to speed. What happened last week, and what stood out to you?
Oh, a bunch of bills died last week, which is kind of a wonderful thing because it really, well, that sounds bad. If you had something you cared about, you probably don't feel that way. But there were 7,500 bills that were around that many that get filed every session. And as session moves on, that's just a daunting number to contend with. And it just begins to focus and fewer bills are around, which makes the lobby work a lot easier. I mean, if you think just one issue of voting rights, we were trying to track 79 different vehicles that were either bad or could have a bad amendment put on it. And that doesn't even count the good ones that we were watching. And last week, that number shrunk significantly to about 38 that we're still monitoring, with about a dozen that we're highly concerned about.
So the last 2 weeks really are kind of a sprint to the finish, as I described in the open. What's happening over the course of these last 2 weeks? So a lot of bills are dead. The House has passed a lot of bills and sent them over to the Senate. The Senate's passed a lot of bills and sent them over to the House. What's happening over the course of the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, so last Thursday was the deadline for House bills to pass the House. Any House bill that was not out of the House is no longer a living vehicle. So we have now reached the point of the session where both chambers are working on the other chamber's bills. For the most part, there's a couple of exceptions we're going to talk about. The Senate has more flexible deadlines. It can move a lot faster than the House and more flexibly than the House. But for the most part, both chambers are working on the other chamber's bills and will be for the next 2 weeks. The deadline for a Senate bill to pass the House will be Tuesday of next week. So as you can, this is Monday, that's about 8 days away. In the next 8 days, you're going to have a lot of flurry of action as the House tries to move those Senate bills before that deadline. And then after that, we're going to be talking about conference committee reports and what's in a conference committee and what is a conference committee, what's in a conference committee report. And that'll be the focus beginning probably when we talk this time next week.
So let's schoolhouse rocks this thing a little bit, Josh, because you and I might start using words and phrases that folks don't remember from high school government or civics class. So let's use House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7 as an example. So the Senate passed Senate Bill 7 and sent it over to the House, and the House in committee completely replaced Senate Bill 7 with their version, House Bill 6. And remember last week we talked about that there were some amendments that were added on in the middle of the night. So what's happened to that? What's happening with that bill now? Just as an example for what's happening with a whole bunch of other bills, right? We'll get into voting specifically in a second.
So there's a procedure in the House, or really both chambers, where you can, if a bill of similar substance is over, you can substitute it on the floor. And so House Bill 6, in and of itself, is dead. The contents and the ideas of House Bill 6 were stuck into Senate Bill 7. And all the ideas of Senate Bill 7 were left removed and replaced. You then had the big floor fight. Senate Bill 7 passed looking radically different than it did even coming out of committee. So what you now have is the two chambers must reconcile their differences. And in this case, there are substantial differences. So when you go to a conference committee, you're going to take the engrossed version, the version as it finally passed the Senate, and you're going to compare it to the version of the House version as it finally passed the House. And then you're going to try to make them agree. And this is where the rules get super arcane, but in theory, the state of play is limited to what was in 6, what was in 7 in the Senate side, on the Senate version, or in 7 in the House version. They could go outside the bounds, but that requires certain floor votes that of a threshold they may not be able to reach. We'll see. They could add things that are germane or not germane, which would cause a big floor fight when they have to go back. But the next step is whatever this conference committee report agrees on. So there are 5 conferees that get appointed by the House, 5 conferees appointed by the Senate. We do not know who those conferees are yet. Neither chamber has named their conferees, which is interesting. It's been a bit of time, so we're not real clear what's going on with that. But they will name those conferees. They will try to agree to one version of the bill, and then that version of the bill has to go back through the Senate and the House for final approval in that same form, so that it could be sent to the governor's office looking like one bill. So a bill has to pass in exactly both chambers in exactly the same form. And a conference committee is where those differences get worked out, and then they go back to the original chambers for final passage.
And so this week we'll be watching many conference committees get named. We'll be watching Senate bills that have come over to the House. We'll be watching House bills that have gone over to the Senate, and all of them trying to scramble to make them look the same and be able to be passed by both chambers in the next 2 weeks or less. Are there any other deadlines coming up that we should be aware of?
No, the big one would be the next Tuesday, which means the last day for a House calendar would be on Sunday. There'll probably be one final meeting. We'll have likely to have weekend calendars and be working weekends for the next 2 weekends until we get to Sunday night. The next big deadline is the deadline for Senate bills to pass the House.
All right. So on to what I think. I hope that was helpful. I know people have been asking about process, and so thank you for walking us through that.
Yeah, I get very arcane for the next 2 weeks. We're at the 2 weeks where of all the parts in the biennium where the public has the least influence, we are probably at that point where things get very arcane, very member to member, member driven, and move very quickly. We're at a tough to engage part of session, and we're going to help you do that.
So we will, and I also mentioned in the open, Josh, that the next 2 weeks are going to feel like we're all drinking from a fire hose, right? And right. You might not hear every update on every bill that we're working on, but we'll spend 4 or 5 weeks post legislative session kind of letting you know where we landed on everything. And so we'll do our best to keep you up to speed if you're on the rapid response team or legislative engagement groups and by social media. But know that the real update will end up coming post-legislative session. Is that fair?
Very fair, yeah.
So I want to walk us through quickly our 5 kind of priority areas. But before we do that, I know several people emailed or tweeted last week and asked about a particular bill that they cared about that was not on the action alert in the last week or two. And I love getting that feedback because we love hearing what you care about. But do you want to say a word about how we decide what goes on those action alerts? We obviously can't put hundreds and hundreds of bills on the action alert every week, right?
Yeah, largely it's based on what you tell us you care about. And so, I mean, we go all the way back to August of 2020 when our board set a legislative agenda. Our board is appointed to us by your denominations. We don't pick our own board. They are there to represent the position of the denomination on a council, essentially, a big council of close to 70 people. So they set our legislative agenda. And then part of the deal, part of the big effort that takes place at that board retreat that takes 2 days, there's the Venn diagram, if you will, of the things the legislature cares about, and then the things the denominations say they care about. And the nexus of those two tends to be what the priorities are for that particular session. So early on, we identified, I guess back in November, December, January, when you looked at the energy of the bills being filed, what members said they cared about, what the faith community said they cared about, we ended up having 5 things just keep arising to the surface. And those 5 things were racial justice and the George Floyd related issues that arose over the summer. Healthcare, always one of the big ones. Climate, always one of the big ones. LGBTQ equality, or at least in this case, non-discrimination, is kind of the best we're hoping for, unfortunately, this session. And then voting rights, last but certainly not least, if anything, the most important, as the right that is preservative of all other rights. And those 5 bubbled to the surface. That is not the totality of what we're working on. That is just the 5 priorities that we are engaging with the most kind of by volume, if that makes sense. But there are, of course, other issues we are absolutely working on. And we can run through some of those, Scott. Anytime you want to get emails and you want to ask questions the next week, let's chat about it.
Yeah, so if you have those questions or if there are things you care about that you haven't seen on our action alert, please feel free to reach out to me at scott@texasimpact.org, and I'll try my best to give you a timely response. Although now that I just said this on a podcast, I'm sure I'm going to end up with 800 of them, and my response time will be slower. So anyway, let's go ahead and dig in to those priority areas and talk about where we are. So the first one you named was the George Floyd Act and racial justice. Where are we with 2 weeks to go?
Yeah, all eyes are on the Senate. Mostly, I say that, but there are a couple of Senate bills that have reached the House that could also be possible. So in the action alert this week, we're going to have you call, and the action alert for this week, I shouldn't say this week, the action alert for today and tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday, is going to be on a bill that has reached the House floor. It's Senate Bill, not in front of me, but there it is. Senate Bill 2212 by Senator West. It requires an officer to render aid if somebody if their life is in danger. Think about the whole 8 minutes and the horrible 9 minutes we watched of that. At some point, those 3 officers could have stepped in and did not to save Mr. Floyd's life. This would create a duty for officers to act to save somebody's life in that case. That's a very good bill. It is on the House floor today. So we're going to have you call your state representative, and and in the House it has to pass on every bill has to pass on 3rd readings, but in the House they usually do it on 2 separate days. So it'll be up again on 3rd reading tomorrow, and on 3rd reading it has to receive a record vote. So it is still very worth your while to make a call on this today and tomorrow.
Today being Monday, tomorrow being Tuesday. If you're listening to the podcast.
We have some other bills, though, Scott, we need to talk about George Floyd before we move on. Mm-hmm. This is where I said all eyes are on the Senate. We have 2 bills, House Bill 829 and 830. As you'll recall, the larger George Floyd Act, House Bill 88, got chopped up into smaller bills. And there are 3 we're going to talk about. 2 of them have been referred finally As you recall, we had you call the Lieutenant Governor's office asking for them to be referred. They had not been referred for mysterious reasons that are the Senate. Two of the three have been referred, and they are sitting in the Senate Jurisprudence Committee, not the Senate Criminal Justice Committee, but it is a germane committee. We want to make sure you call the Senate Jurisprudence Committee and ask these bills to get heard. We're still going to be calling about House Bill 834. This is the one that requires a second eyewitness or some sort of corroboration of eyewitness testimony in drug-related offenses. This is an issue that goes back to the early 2000s with Tulia, Texas, and how one undercover officer it was shown to have this undercover officer fabricated evidence in order to have people convicted of crimes they didn't commit. And you can Google this instance to find out more about it. It's a thing that we've been working on advocates have been working on for 2 decades. And it is sitting unreferred in the Senate right now.
All right. Anything else? George Floyd Act, racial justice.
Not yet, but stay tuned. As Senate Bill 69, Senate Bill 68, those are 2 Senate bills that are also good George Floyd related bills that we may be having you call on if they have time in the House. We have no reason to think that they're not going to get moving. But if they don't get moving, we may have you act on those by the end of the week.
All right. Next up, we have a couple of healthcare bills. We're still watching.
Yeah, and just like the George Floyd stuff, the theme here is a slow-moving Senate, where the House has acted on these measures, and the Senate is the obstacle. This is a theme that I want to highlight for you. It is true that the Senate often just fails to act on things that the House has acted on that we would be in favor of. And so there are 2 bills, House Bill 290, which would create 12 months of eligibility for children, so that every 6 months there's not a speed bump so that they get knocked off of the Children's Health Insurance Program. It has not been referred to any committee. So we are still calling the Lieutenant Governor's office about this bill, trying to get it moving. And then the second bill is House Bill 133, which is 12 months of eligibility after a pregnancy. This bill has been referred to the Health and Human Service Committee, but has failed to receive a hearing. It's been there quite a while. We have been told, it's hearsay, but that's how this building often operates, that the chair of the committee is not in favor of it. We don't want you to light her up angry. We need to have a working relationship. This is not how this business works. But we do need phone calls to try to find out why. We want to know the policy reasons why this bill is not moved forward. If there are policy concerns, we need to know what they are so that we can see if they can be addressed or not. So that may be one of the calls that we have you make. Very polite, very gentle, but very principled to find out why it is that this bill is stuck.
All right, taking notes on that one for the legislative engagement group members. We'll talk soon. Next up, climate.
Report that back. Yeah, so third, climate. Yeah. Climate has kind of been reduced to power, electric power, because that is the big topic this session. There are many things you can talk about with climate, but the great big one that is on everybody's minds, because we all lived through it, was the electric grid. It's also the biggest polluter and biggest contributor to greenhouse gas, even more than your vehicles and even more than industry. All 3 are big contributors, don't get me wrong, but the biggest one historically has been it's not your car does absolutely pollute, don't get me wrong on that, but believe it or not, your house actually pollutes more because of the ways in which we generate electricity. So we're still waiting on a lot of ideas to see what moves forward. There are a lot of things around the margins that are moving, but big conversation about the future of our electric grid is pending. We're waiting on Senate Bill 3 to see what is going to end up in it. Senate Bill 3 has passed the Senate. The Senate has acted on it. It is over in the House State Affairs Committee, and we're going to see what the House decides it wants to do, not do, put in it, not put in it. We're still waiting to see what that big Senate Bill 3 looks like. In the meantime, the Senate State Affairs Committee did pass a bad bill out, Senate Bill 1282. It would create higher transmission costs for renewable energy. It has gotten out of Senate State Affairs. We're going to have to contend with it. There are also a couple of smaller bills that we're watching, or not smaller, but single other bad renewable energy bills that we're watching. They have not yet come out of committee. Senate Bill 1278 is similar. It also creates cost, but for different reasons, on renewable energy generators. And then you have Senate Bill 1003, which creates these really impossible to meet standards for where you cite a renewable energy project. So we are keeping close tabs on this. It has not been a good session for renewable power. A lot of opportunism by the oil and gas industry this session, even though they are the ones indisputably that were the biggest contributors to the blackout.
So next up on the list is LGBTQ non-discrimination. Small victory there last Thursday when House Bill 1399 died, but where are we now in terms of that issue?
Yeah, so to update everybody, on Monday of last week, we had a big panic. The calendars committee stuck House Bill 1399 on the Wednesday calendar. The last day was Thursday. So it was very much possible that we could have gotten to it. There was a large effort. It takes a whole lot of work to do nothing sometimes. And there was a very large effort to slow down the calendar so that we did not get to this bill over on the House side. It did not come up. The House vehicle is no more. Nevertheless, that is a small victory. Nothing is done until sine die. There are still 3 Senate bills very much alive and well. 2 of them have arrived in the House, Senate Bill 29 and Senate Bill 1646, which we've talked about. Senate Bill 29 is out of committee. You may have seen the videos of Chair Harold Dutton letting this bill out of committee.
And we talked about that. We talked about that last Monday. Yeah.
Good. Then we won't recap other than to say that there's some Democratic infighting and a lot of acrimonious behavior between elected officials that led to this bill getting out of committee. Senate Bill 1646 is not received a hearing in committee. It's probably a little too draconian for the House, but then a lot of stuff has surprised us this session. This is the one that would make parents gender affirming, parents that affirm their children in their gender identity. It would make them child abusers if they sought medical care, gender affirming medical care, and would lead to the parents being prosecuted as felons and to have their children taken away by the state. That one is sitting in committee. The one that we think is the biggest threat is actually a Senate bill that's still in the Senate. Now, remember, this was the big asterisk that I mentioned earlier, where the Senate is more flexible and the Senate can move more quickly. And so we expect Senate Bill 1311 to move out of the Senate and to force the House to contend with it. This is not a true companion, but is substantially similar to the 1399 House bill that we were fighting last week. It is not going to make the parents criminals. It's just going to cut off access to medical care by prohibiting doctors from providing the treatments. It is likely that Senate Bill 1311 should move through the Senate. So the action alert will tell you to call your state senator, and bonus points if you have, not just bonus points, more effective is if you have friends in Amarillo or the Panhandle is a key region of the state. Brownsville and South Texas is another key region if you have friends down there, or in the West Houston, West Harris County area. If you have friends in those regions of the state, your state senator is particularly important, and it would be good for you to reach out to those friends to let them know their state senator is of particular importance and have them make calls to their state senator on these bills.
Right. So last one on the list, and I'm surprised we didn't talk about it first because it has been a topic we probably covered more than any other during the course of this legislative session, but voting rights, where are we?
They are not done. Senate Bill 7 is not going to be satisfactory. There was a bad bill on the definition of disability to vote by mail that made it out of the House last week, despite big efforts to stop it. There is going to be a bill, Senate Bill 155, on your action alert today. It's on the floor here in a couple hours that has to do with if you move counties, but fail to cancel your previous voter registration, and then they find out by, say you get a jury summons, and you're like, well, I don't live there anymore, I'm not a resident. Then that will be referred to the Attorney General's office for criminal investigation. It doesn't mean you've committed a crime. It just means that they're going to investigate you like maybe you did.
So we heard a lot of testimony on that one in committee with like college kids who go off to school and register to vote in their new community without canceling their registration, right? This is kind of
that's my big concern with it. I did that. I mean, frankly, my parents were in Dallas County. I went to Texas A&M. I believe I changed my driver's license, but I didn't cancel my Dallas County. Anyway, this happens with college kids all the time. I can't even remember. It was 20 years ago and it wasn't that big. I mean, I was 18 years old and didn't really think about it. And I very easily could have gotten a jury summons and said, and the way, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these things, but on the form, there's a top box of excuses and then there's a bottom box of other excuses. And if you say, oh, I'm not a resident, click, check, and didn't read down to realize, oh, I'm a college student, check, and you picked the wrong box, then you may be referred for criminal investigation. It didn't mean you committed a crime. You may not even ever know about it, but that just means they're going to be looking into you. The other big area where this is going to be a factor is it's an expansion of the Attorney General's authority to look into immigration stuff. Now, it doesn't happen that often, but occasionally somebody will check they're not a citizen. They shouldn't do it, especially if they are a citizen and they just don't want to do jury service. Maybe they just messed up. It's really unclear why somebody would do it. Not that many people do it. We don't think, according to the Secretary of State's office, we don't think too many people do it. Nevertheless, it's going to be expanding the Attorney General's authority to refer somebody for committing a state level crime that would expose them to possible deportation. So there's a number of problems with this approach, and we are hoping that this bill gets amended on the floor. It's unclear what's about to happen on the floor. A couple hours out from a floor fight, and you've pretty much lost all influence, other than to call your state representative and ask that they vote no on the bill.
Anything else voting wise? I know you're watching, you said like 79 different bills or whatever, but anything else?
Smaller number today. It's 38 now. But yeah, no, we're still waiting. The big thing that's sucking the oxygen out of the room is Senate Bill 7. Everybody is waiting to see exactly what happens with it in the conference committee. But meanwhile, while that large drama is on stage one, there's a bunch of smaller stuff that we've got to really watch carefully, because it's quite, I don't know what's going to happen with Senate Bill 7. This is not any inside knowledge or intelligence. It's pure hypothetical, but it is possible that they end up spiking the big bill, and going with these a package of smaller bills, and then amending those smaller bills with all sorts of stuff that they want instead, and then you're caught off guard. So you got to watch it all, and we will be.
All right. Any other closing thoughts for today?
Yeah, I mean, let's mention some of the smaller stuff that they did.
Go for it.
Last week was kind of wild. The House did pass what I'll call culture war curriculum. There's I don't know what else to call it, when you're banning the teaching and getting overly prescriptive with how teachers talk about race in the classroom. You're getting into culture war territory. And that bill passed the House and is over in the Senate. You have a second bill that is culture war curriculum on informed patriotism, whatever that is, where basically they want you to read and students to learn. They want kindergarten through 12th grade should be learning about the Federalist Papers and Alexis de Tocqueville's writings. I mean, kindergartners learning that, right? So
I have a kindergartner. I think that might be a little much. I just want to throw that out there.
there were a series of amendments, including sticking in things like Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech and the writings of Frederick Douglass, that were put into the bill on the House side. We'll be watching to see what the Senate does with that. It would not surprise me if those things came out on the Senate side, or some number of those things came out and some stayed in. We'll see. We'll wait and see. But you've got the culture wars playing out in the schoolhouse in a big way with this legislation. Guns.
And I'll just say on that one, and probably the ones you're bringing up next, check out the Ledge TV video clips. We have highlights of some of the conversation and speeches on a number of these bills. So check that out as a great resource and share those.
Yeah. And like Scott mentioned earlier, just because we're not talking about it on Weekly Witness doesn't mean we're not working it. We're trying to provide you with the things where we think you can have the most influence. And some of these things are more challenging. For instance, guns. The Senate has now passed a version. The House and the Senate have both appointed conferees. At least the House has. I think the Senate has. I'll have to check on the Senate. But I know the House appointed conferees before we left town last week. So the unlicensed carry of firearms is very much alive and well and headed to conference committee. I bet we talk about it pretty soon if we'll see what happens with it. The House did pass a good bill that has to do with air conditioning in our prisons. Many of our prisons are not air conditioned. We have had dozens of people die from the heat because if it's 105 outside, it's 130 inside. So it did pass the House. I say that and bring this bill up because I want you to watch it in the Senate. I predict it may meet a similar fate as the George Floyd and healthcare bills in the Senate. The House is willing to do a number of modest things that the Senate just will not do at all. And you, the voter, need to know that about the Senate. And then finally, we're continuing to privatize our foster care system. Foster care has continues to be in the news. It has been in the news for over a decade. A federal judge continues to press the state to make reforms. The state continues to resist the federal judge, although I think they're probably done litigating. The bill that they passed last week continues to privatize the foster care system. And privatization is really scary for this reason. I mean, look at our electric grid. We privatized our electric grid, and they are finding it extremely difficult to claw their way back into it regulatorily. You have a number of privatized actors who have a vested interest. They have lobbyists and are able to make things complicated. The other big problem with privatization is a complete lack of accountability. When you go to your lawmaker as a citizen of a democracy to say, we want you to fix this thing, they turn around and say, well, it's been privatized. I can't really do anything about it. They wash their hands of it. It's a way for them to abdicate responsibility on a thing that used to be under the complete control of the democracy. So we are continuing to do that with foster care children. Foster care children continue to, they don't vote. And their parents often have too many issues in their life to be able to vote too. So it continues to be a very challenging issue. And we count us in the skeptical column of increasing the privatization of our foster care system and having it provide good care to children. Anyway, that's kind of some of the other news that happened last week on the House calendar.
All right. Any other thoughts or news as we go into the final 2-week stretch of the legislative session?
It is going to be very hard for you to engage, but not impossible. We're going to help you do that. Stay tuned to your action alerts. When we give you an action alert, it will probably be something that has to be done within 24 to 48 hours or it'll be too late. So there are going to be, the action alerts are going to be much smaller, much more targeted, and hopefully more frequent.
So keep an eye on the Action Center at texasimpact.org. Make sure that you are signed up to be on the rapid response notification list and a legislative engagement group so you can be paired up with other advocates in your district. You can find all of those at texasimpact.org in the Action Center, or you can email me at scott@texasimpact.org. Josh, thanks so much for the time today. Good luck over the course of the next few weeks. I hope you make it through those 2 weeks with enough strength and energy, and then get a few weeks to rest afterwards. So friends, thank you for tuning in. As we have mentioned several times, we have 2 more weeks left in the legislative session. It's time to go as strong as we can. Let's finish this session strong. Then, like Josh, we'll give you a week or 2 break, and then we'll start talking about what we learned and what we need to do during the legislative interim. And remember, if you appreciate Texas Impact and the Weekly Witness community, please make sure that you and your congregation are members. You can go to texasimpact.org/join to become a member today. Friends, now is the time. Let's make our telephone calls. Let's invite our friends to join us in this process. Make sure that you like, comment, and share Texas Impact social media, and that you are subscribed to Weekly Witness in your favorite podcast source. Now is the time for you and your congregations to be active and engaged. Let's get to work.